This is announcing Emulsify 5, a design system generator using Gatsby and Storybook. So yeah, let's get to a little bit of introductions. My name is Evan. I live in the Nashville, Tennessee area. I work for Four Kitchens, obviously. It probably couldn't be more obvious. I'm a technology skeptic and future homesteader, but until then, I'm a senior front-end engineer for Kitchens and project lead on Emulsify. It's very true, actually. Like chickens and lots of children, and it's getting weird in my house. That's my life. That's enough about me, though. All right.
How many chickens do you have?
4.
How many children do you have?
4.
Oh, okay.
Told you, it's getting weird, man.
Is there one for you, like, so at the same time, you get a child and a chicken at the same time?
No, but we did get a chicken per child. It's a good question. This is actually really relevant to the talk, so thank you. Oh, that was weird. This is like throwing me off. All right, so quick sort of cap of what Emulsify is. I'm sure a lot of you are probably familiar with it if you're in here. But what Emulsify has been for us is it's been a prototyping tool. It is sort of an out-of-the-box experience centered around component-driven development. So this was a big push. Probably everyone in here in front-end theming has been doing this for a long time. We too were just trying to find a way to encapsulate that, build it into our process. It uses Pattern Lab for a pattern library, Atomic Design for the organization of files, and then has a gulp build system. This is the current version, by the way. This session is about the new version. And it's also a Drupal 8 theme. So it's a starter kit that you can just hit the road running. It kind of has things to help you hook up that component library to your Drupal templates and things like this. Again, this is probably mostly familiar to everyone. And then we were able to build some twig functions that we actually separated from Emulsify, but they get pulled in automatically to help with like passing in classes if you use BIM, or attaching libraries that's with the same syntax that Drupal uses. So kind of best practices, things like that. So that's Emulsify. What we're talking about today is we're talking about the future of Emulsify. And the big changes kind of fall into 2 categories. For one, we're moving from the concept of pattern library, so a pattern library as sort of the authoritative thing around which a team centers, to sort of a larger design system. So we're moving from this idea of just a pattern library to a design system. And yes, I'm going to talk about what these words mean, at least from my perspective. And then the next big change is the tech stack change. So these kind of came at the same time, and it was kind of convenient that they did. It allowed us to sort of widen what we could do with the product. But yeah, those are the 2 big changes. So let's talk about the first, pattern library to design system. So I'm going to talk through this. Just know that there are things and there are words. And in this world of these words that I'm about to use, let's just commit to these being the meanings of these words, just in this room right now. Like, you don't have to agree with me outside of this room, but I need to be able to explain these things. So in my mind, a pattern library like Storybook, like Pattern Lab, like Fractal, these are tools that help unify a production team. So they help unify the designers and the developers. There's a way to prototype and quickly build components and organize them and display them. There are even ways to add notes to them, that are kind of tucked away, but it's really a production team tool. I don't know if you've ever tried to share a Pattern Lab with a content editor or with an executive, but it's really centered around the developer experience, the designer and developer experience of building a product. So I think of those, a pattern library, as unifying the production team. A style guide, on the other hand, I think of as unifying an organization. So I'm kind of old, so when I think about this in my mind, it helps me to explain this as, I saw that look on your face. It helps me to think of this as that giant book that like sits in the corner of like the large organizations. That's like how to use a logo, page 1. Everybody know what I'm talking about? Organizations, this is a real thing. Like, it's like branding guidelines and everything. Well, we have been moving. We at Four Kitchens are just trying to move towards this same place that the web has been moving the past few years, which is trying to provide a design system like that for web usage and for non-web usage. There are people talking about using the online design system to even sort of guide print guidelines for the organization and things like that. But that's what a style guide is, in my mind. It cares about unifying an organization. And the reason I chose the term design system, and again, these are just, we're applying meaning to these words so we can move on and talk about tools. The reason I chose the words design system is that a design system in my mind cares about both of those things. So it cares about content editors, it cares about executive buy-in, it cares about production team, it cares about getting everyone on the same page and unifying an organization so that there is a starting place for building products, for having sub-brands. As soon as you get into this complex world, you need systems in place like this. All right, so I was afraid of that. That's probably my fault for not knowing what slides would do on a screen like this, but that says Carbon Design System up in the corner. If you're familiar with design systems on the web, this has always been kind of a front runner. It's designed really well. This is IBM's open source design system. It's actually a Gatsby site. Unfortunately, I kind of need you to see the things on the side. Let me tweak this, since I can do that. And I'll just do it for this one slide. Yeah, there we go. That's lovely. So yeah, this is their design system. So as you can even see from the tree, which is what I wanted to pull over and show you, this cares about a lot more than just a production team. This is literally, this is like onboarding. This cares about getting an entire organization onto the same page so that designers and developers have an authoritative source that tells them how to build and how to use the components for the website, possibly for things that are offline. But it also has all kinds of other things, and we're going to go through a little bit of this. Hopefully it won't matter that you can't see the side, but you can see, I just wanted you to look at that list on the side. This goes far beyond sort of where a pattern library is intended to take you, and that's a good thing. So this is one of the pages on the site, and I wanted to show you this because this is the page on the site that ties you most directly to a pattern library. So there is the idea of components. This is actually the components listing right here that I'm on, and it's showing you a breadcrumb component. So it's showing you what that breadcrumb looks like in IBM's style guide and their pattern library. It's showing you some code. You can see that they use a variety of code languages in their systems: React, Angular, Vue. And so it shares some concepts with the pattern library, but again, if you want to go to this and look at this, you'll notice as you scroll down the pages or go through the tabs like usage and style, it cares about a lot more than just the component and how it gets developed and how it gets, it cares about how you use it, when you use it, style guidelines around how to use it. So that's just a components page on Carbon Design System. But like I said, it cares about a lot more than that. There are entire pages dedicated to their usage of color and when and how to use certain colors in their brand. There are entire pages dedicated to accessibility. So again, this is like unifying an organization. This is saying, we as IBM, this is where we stand on accessibility as it regards color and keyboard and developers. So again, hopefully this is driving home this kind of difference that I'm talking about between a design system and a pattern library. So on a high level, a design system is, number one, easily consumed by a variety of audiences. I don't know if you noticed this, but if you have a pattern lab or a storybook in your mind and you just looked at what I showed you, except for, looked bad on the screen, but it's a more highly designed, easily consumable product. So this isn't just a designer developer tool, even from the design standpoint of the style guide itself. It's something that's meant to be handed to a non-tech person, a content person, anybody. It's also organized to meet those needs of multiple audiences. So a designer and developer knows where to go, but so does someone who just needs to enter content and figure out how to get that content on the web. It's also higher level than a pattern library, and hopefully that's been obvious. Documentation on the project, design approach as a whole contains all of those things. And then in my mind, I tagged this one on the end. I think it's important that a design system obviously be something that's easy to update and to edit. So again, it's not a designer developer tool, it's something that's meant for someone at the organization is going to have to maintain this. And that's something that's kind of key to understanding where we're going. So, you know, I told you there were two things, design system and tech stack changes. Why a design system? This came out of a very real need. So we've been developing with component-driven development for I think about 3 years, or at least using Emulsify. We've had that in some capacity. And so we've been through a number of projects using this methodology. And what we noticed is that a lot of times, Four Kitchens works with a lot of organizations that are kind of at the scale where they might partner with us to build a project or to build in tandem with their development team internally, but a lot of times there's a handoff of like someone internally will be maintaining this project. And the organization as a whole might be sold in theory on component-driven development, but unless the designers and the developers and the organization as a whole share that vision, there is a great risk to that being lost and us slipping, you know, all of the reasons that we moved towards component-driven development getting lost. And then we're back to 3 years later, our website sucks, we need a new project, and you lose all of the potential of why you took the time to break things out into modular pieces and to build the way that you did. So that was something that I noticed on projects that was a problem, and it was kind of around the same time when people were talking about style guides and design systems. Brad Frost is someone that comes to mind. He had a lot of blog posts and conversation about this probably about a year and a half ago when he came out with Style Guide, which is a terrible name. But it was his answer to, he's the maintainer or the builder of Pattern Lab, and he saw this need too. It was like, okay, now I have the production team on the same page. He calls them the workshop, Pattern Lab being the workshop, and the Style Guide or design system being the storefront. And I love that language because it's like one of them has to be presented to the organization as a whole. So yeah, buy-in and a house of cards. I wanted to move away from this potential of losing these best practices that we're building into these projects that really we sell these clients on. And they are sold on it in theory, but they need the tools to actually make it something that they live with for years and buy into. The second thing that we run into specifically is we need to be able to support like sub-brands or organizations. So we work a lot with higher education. As you can imagine, there's like a parent school, and then there's all of this plethora of child schools, and they build different websites for each, but they share branding, they share colors and typography, and so this was this didn't grow out of theory in my mind, this grew out of watching these kinds of things, even within the organizations that we work with at Four Kitchens. And I saw this need for like, we need to be able to fit this need for the higher level organization, not just for a school here and a school here. And we need to be able to speak to this higher level design system that can help all of them get on the same page and share resources and knowledge. And then just the general movement of design systems, the reason it's become popular in the past few years, like I said with the Style Guide, it's the same thing. It's growing in popularity for the same reasons. It's trying to fill a need, not just that Four Kitchens has. All right, so that's design systems. So that's kind of part one. Does anybody have any questions about that part right now? Hopefully we'll have time at the end too, but I just wanted to ask that because we're going to move into the second part. So let's talk about the tech stack in Emulsify 5. So really when we started approaching this, so the first version of Emulsify was really us internally at Four Kitchens saying, okay, we need to get our front-end team on the same page. Like we need to have shared tooling, we need to have best practices, not to restrict anybody's coding abilities or anything like that, but just to have these sorts of best practices baked down. And then it's in our blood to just release things open source. So we did that. And it ended up being a useful tool, I think, for people in the community. I think we're at around 65,000 downloads or whatever for Emulsify, so it's been a good tool. Well, now that it's become that, and now that it's become sort of a crucial tool internally for us and externally for others, it becomes a different ballgame. Like when we talk about changing the tool or doing something with it, we started having these conversations possibly even as early as third quarter last year, but at least really dove in during the last quarter of last year into starting doing researching on these things. And really what mattered to us were a few things from the beginning. One, thriving ecosystems. And so when we sell a client a tool that we use, and that tool uses other tools, we need those to be stable, solid projects. And so as you'll see, what I'm going to talk about here in a second in the actual implementation, we ended up choosing a couple of tools that are different from our current tool set. So one of those being Gatsby. You're probably all familiar with Gatsby, but as it currently stands, and actually these might even be outdated. I was just trying to find actual data that wouldn't be me making it up. When I looked last, it was at 1 million monthly downloads. There's 2,000 plus committers. Storybook's 500 plus committers, but it has 4 million downloads a month. It's a very stable product. They just released 5.0, which has a lot of great, fantastic changes, and Gatsby is the same way. These are thriving ecosystems. Like, these are things that we're not latching our clients onto things that are irresponsible. The second theme is really specific to our team, but I don't know if this will matter to some of you. For us at Four Kitchens, we kind of have two separate teams at time. We have a JavaScript team that is large and extremely solid and completely separate from worlds like Drupal and from CMS land, and they do all of this fantastic work, and I live on the other side. I tend to do a lot more CMS work, and I've done some JavaScript work, but we kind of have these two sides of the house, and we've always been interested in sharing knowledge better than we have historically. And so our tool set that we build with Emulsify really just, frankly, was not helpful for that team. It just wasn't. Like, a Drupal 8 starter kit is not helpful for that team. The overhead and the usage of a tool like Pattern Lab for them specifically was not helpful. So there was never even a question in their mind as to, like, everyone will adopt Emulsify. We always had the hope to move to tooling that we would be able to share more pieces, share more knowledge, and really be able to, for teams to cross, for us to be able to help with their projects, for them to be able to help with ours, share knowledge. But actually what I'm excited about, even beyond that, is from last quarter until now, this was also a discussion with the UX team and how we're combining efforts with them, specifically around design systems and that need. And then, of course, back end and front end, and kind of tying things better together there. So that was something that was really interesting to us. And then, of course, the last, but not least, to a room full of developers, if you're a developer, is like using tools that you're excited about using, that are sort of future-oriented, that are flexible tools. For us, that was sort of this space of React and JavaScript libraries and Gatsby and Storybook. So we live in the Drupal world. Like I said, that's kind of a lot of projects that I work on are in that world, but even that space is transitioning. So obviously you're at a conference that speaks to that. But one of the best examples of this in my mind is the admin UI.js initiative. So this initiative to build the back end of Drupal in something like React. So this is moving all of us towards a direction where having tools that work with React, having tools that work with Twig, these things matter. Not just tools that live over here that work with one, and tools that live over here that work with another. All right, so what's new and what's different? Need a time check. What time do I have to be done?
It's been 20 minutes.
Okay. New and different. So a design system is the new piece. So that's what we've added in 5.0. The design system is built on Gatsby. We'll get into the internals of that here in a second. What we've changed is we've moved from Pattern Lab for the pattern library to Storybook, to using Storybook. And then the build system was written in Gulp, and we're moving to a Webpack build system for this project. So those are the new and different things. There are some pieces that stay the same, but for the most part, this is obviously a major shift, which is why we wanted to talk about it in this manner. All right, so let's talk about the design system piece. So this is specifically speaking to the Gatsby part of this project. So there's a couple of pieces in play here. One is a Gatsby theme. So Gatsby themes are a fairly new thing, at least in terms of stability. And a Gatsby theme, in my mind, I'll get into it a little bit, is almost like a parent theme in Drupal. We'll talk about that a little bit more in depth. But that sort of encapsulates the style guide, the functionality, and the build for the style guide. So we're not talking about your project that you're developing. We're talking about just the style guide when we speak about the Gatsby theme. And the Gatsby starter, so Gatsby has had this idea of starters for a long time, and there are many starters you can download to create a blog or create a WordPress Gatsby site that hooks those two things up. Starters are interested in sort of encapsulating helpful functionality, and you just download it and it does it. It's like a plugin in my mind of that idea of like encapsulating something that's helpful. You hit the ground running and do the thing you want to do that's specific to your project. That for us contains the style guide content. So this is now getting into your project now. So if you're building a project, the Gatsby theme encapsulates what the style guide does, the functionality in the build. The Gatsby starter actually is where you're populating your style guide, where you're filling the pages about accessibility and color and layout and all of those things. And it also holds the ability to design your style guide. That was something that mattered to us that I'll actually show you later, is the ability to theme this. Remember me talking about the importance of high design with this? From the beginning, we were only interested in a tool that allowed this to be fully themable, for it to look completely different here for one client and completely different here for another client. So yeah, the contents and the design, the style guide, and then obviously the things that tie in most directly. This bottom layer ties in most directly to our current version of Emulsify, by the way, the starter. So obviously it's where your project components live. It's where your project's build system lives. It's where your Drupal 8 theming information lives. So it is your starter kit sort of theme out of the box. So those are the two layers on the design system side. So a little bit more about Gatsby themes. This was a new thing to me, and I'm assuming since it's fairly new that it might be new to people here. So I'll go through that really quickly. In my mind, it's a Drupal theme sort of on steroids maybe, because it doesn't live in this Drupal sort of specific ecosystem of what a theme can and can't do. Really what the power of it is it's almost, it's really a dependency. So they've kind of created this, enhanced the dependency chain in Gatsby. And so it's really, at bottom, it's just an NPM package that you install into your project, and you get all of the benefits of that thing, but that thing can also be upgraded. Is anyone here an Emulsify user currently? No? Yeah, kind of, yeah. Have you ever tried to update Emulsify?
We faced the exact same thing with Particle.
Yeah. So that's why we're having this conversation. Yeah. Yeah, it's not easy because it's a starter kit. You know, it doesn't package all this functionality like a base theme did. You know, like Zen did, where it's like, oh yeah, I want all of that stuff. I never want to change it. I just want it to give me what I need. That's old Drupal theme. Maybe there's the guy who wrote it. Yay. Anyways, it's not that idea. It's like a starter kit. You plug it in. You delete what you don't want to use. You create what you want to use. There's a lot of helpful stuff in that. But for the pieces that you want to upgrade over time, like one of the things that we came out with recently in Emulsify baked into our build system was accessibility testing. Well, I had a lot of people hit me up and they're like, how can I upgrade to 4.0 or whatever the version was that included accessibility testing? And I was like, really painfully, we'll talk about it. So yeah, we were trying to get away from this concept, and this layer helps us do this with this piece with the design system. That's really the purpose that it serves, at least for our project. So a Gatsby theme can serve multiple projects. It has an easy upgrade path. I just talked about that. It's also composable. You can use multiple themes. In fact, themes, I kind of got the sense from the Gatsby world, like they almost wish they could use a different word, but there's not one for it. Gatsby themes, one of them could serve the interests of specific functionality for your Gatsby project. Take away my talk here about design systems. It could serve a really functional piece over here, and then one could serve a design need over here. It's a very flexible sort of, again, it's just a dependency chain thing that they've written in. So you can use multiple themes. A really amazing concept built into Gatsby themes, and this is really, I think, the strongest selling point for us when we started reading about this. Is this idea of component shadowing. And I'm going to try and actually show this at the very end, but not only do themes provide the ability for you to, in your child, which is your project that you're developing for a client, in this child where your design system is there, you can style it, you can change it to their needs. This idea of component shadowing is what gives you the ability to change the design system in any way that you want. You literally can say, this component in the Gatsby theme, I'm going to completely re-architect it over here. I'm going to make it do something completely different. Sidebar is going to be a top menu. I mean, we're talking like this is as powerful as it gets in terms of overriding and restructuring the child as opposed to the parent. And it's now stable as of, I think, like late June or early July. So this is a very, very new thing, but it fit our need perfectly. Gatsby starters. So a starter, I kind of went through this. It packages common design functionality, starter kit for speeding up development. This is really specific to what we needed it to do. It can inherit themes, but the big point that I want to make here is it's actually not required. So a starter kit, it isn't like the ecosystem in Gatsby changed to where you now build a theme that does this kind of high-level stuff, and then you build a starter kit. No. The reason we're doing a starter kit is because it serves a very specific need, just like Emulsify pre-version 5 did. You needed a starter kit to get you building your project. It has a build system for your project. It has a pattern library built into it for your project. But one of the cool things about this is that this is not a required layer. So you can install the design guide that we've created separately from Emulsify, that's now a separate package. You can install that package, and you could create a design guide that's concerned with React projects. Has nothing to do with Drupal. Has nothing to do with this ecosystem that we kind of probably care about more in this room. That's the power of this. It's just a parent thing that you can use, the parent dependency that you can use. You can get all the goodness from it. You could, write it in vanilla JavaScript. You could write whatever. The Emulsify Gatsby theme. So this kind of gets into the what we built a theme for. So we built a theme to house the style guide. So the style guide structure is contained within the theme. This includes pages and component documentation written in MDX. So MDX is just Markdown that you have the ability to insert pieces of JSX on. If you're familiar with React, that means that you can write Markdown files. It's very easy. Anyone could write a Markdown file. Your content editors can write Markdown files, those sorts of things. But at the same time, you have this power of being able to insert React components into a page and have those on the page itself running code, which we'll demonstrate here in a little bit. It's a powerful tool for writing any kind of documentation, as you'll see. And the style guide also contains the components for the style guide. So this is like eating our own dog food sort of thing. So the components that make up building the style guide are now encapsulated in this theme. They're over here. They're not in your Drupal project where they don't belong. They're encapsulated here, which means that we can upgrade those over time when there's bugs, or we can add features, and those are all contained over there. Those are also built in React. So again, ideally this layer is unconcerned with starters that want to inherit it. It's unconcerned with Drupal theming and all of that. And then of course it contains base style guide design. So we have inserted some sort of minimal styling to this that you can override. Currently, this is in a very kind of flexible state right now. Currently, you can kind of use built-in Gatsby styling methods, so Gatsby kind of comes out of the box. You don't have to use something like Emotion or other JS to CSS libraries. It kind of has its built-in styling, and we just did that, just as a minimal sort of MVP approach. And then, so it contains the design for the style guide itself. And again, the key factor here, the reason we even went down this path to begin with, is total and utter flexibility. Excuse me. All right, so let's talk about the Drupal starter. So we've built this design system. We built this in Gatsby as a Gatsby theme. Like I said before, it can be used in other things, but for our need, for Emulsify's need, most common need, we need to be able to hook this on with basically what our current Emulsify is, which is our build for our projects. And so that's what our Gatsby Drupal starter is. And the reason this is a starter is because, again, a starter in the Gatsby space is just a way to pre-package functionality that you're going to reuse again and again. The Gatsby starter allows you to serve that Gatsby design system directly from this repo. So it just lives as a dependency in your tool chain, but you're not running commands over here. You're not running, have two windows open. It's not that world. It's just a dependency in your tool chain. It means you're able to run your style guide and your pattern library from one directory. It means that your style guide pulls components from the same directory that your pattern library does and that Drupal does. So yeah, as you can imagine, it's going to contain a place for all of your style guide documentation. It's going to contain a place for all of your components. It's going to contain your pattern library, which, like I said, we're moving to Storybook for that. And we're going to demonstrate this a little bit later, but your React and Twig components can live side by side there, which is probably really interesting to folks who are doing progressive decoupling. Drupal 8 theme files live in this, obviously, and then the build system for the project lives here. So this is your build system to take care of processing CSS and transpiling and all the islands-ish-ations that need to happen for your theming, image minification, all that stuff. All right. I kind of referenced this before, but again, I just can't state enough the coolness of the separation between these concerns, because what this means is it means that we could also build starters for other needs. So if we have a React project that we really want to sort of center around some best practices for, maybe it's a create React app, base installation that uses some of our organizational structure that we use internally, we can make that starter because the Drupal starter lives over here. It's concerned with Drupal. You can make starters in any of these other things. All right, let's get to the fun stuff. How am I doing on time, Luke?
It's been 30 minutes.
How long do I have?
You have 20 minutes.
Okay. That sounds about right. All right. So I am in the starter here, and I already have it set up just for time's sake. But this is, again, the starter. So this starter, do what?
Can you make it bigger?
I can, yes.
I'm sure the back row can't see it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's still, it's kind of small, isn't it?
You're going to cut off stuff on the left. Full screen.
That's all right. Is that okay? Wait. Oh, left.
Get closer.
There you go. The other left.
All right. So we have some commands in here. Let's open up some code. Where did that open up? Here we are. I'll make it bigger. Just give me a second. Ooh, look, my sidebar gets bigger. It's nice. Oh, that's what I needed, actually. So there's some of our commands there. So we have in this starter, in basically what will be your project repo, we have a couple of commands that you'll care about out of the gate, which are develop, which is going to run your project build and start Storybook, which is now your pattern library. So again, this is like the developer experience here of this project. And then we have a develop Gatsby command that is going to run the style guide. So let's take a look at that first, actually. Oh, this is so weird. So this is the build process for the project and also firing up Storybook. By the way, I should mention, this is the release that we're doing today is very alpha. So this isn't like populated with an entire project's worth of components or anything. So we are working on this, and we'll get to that later, that we would love your help. Yeah. We all work together. All right, but this is a React button and a Twig button side by side. Let me show you the code for this. So we have our components directory up here. We have a couple of atoms and a molecule. Here is our Twig button. So this is just like, in Emulsify currently, you have your Twig file. We also have a data file right here that is going to populate our button. Click on this button. Oh, didn't mean to look at that yet. So we have our data file, we have that, and then this is what's informing Storybook. So we have our stories.js file. So as you can see, there's sort of a typical syntax for importing React components. There's a different syntax for importing the Twig button and populating it with content. but it's a fairly standardized thing. So here's our actual button content here. Oh yeah, I forgot the data that provides that is actually this. Actually, we'll leave the big. Let's leave that alone. Looks good. And then we're populating Storybook here. Add React button and add a Twig button. You can see again the syntax down here is a little bit different for populating the Twig button than the React button. Don't worry, dangerously set is a good thing. All the cool kids do it. All right, so we have our button. There was live reloading. You couldn't really see that, it was off the screen, but live reloading for Twig files, live reloading for React files.
So we're using the Twig.js right there. The data that you're handing into this, you're just setting it, or you can import any format you want, JSON, YAML, whatever.
Yeah.
You just that index file just grabs the data it needs. You don't, I'm still thinking pattern lab brain. You don't have some global thing with magic globbing. You just give it data and show it off, right?
Yeah, and so it's kind of in a funny place because as I'll show you in a second, the design guide actually populates from the YAML. And this was kind of our approach, but you and I were talking about this earlier, this idea of presenter components versus like a, what was the word that you used that was good?
Pure component.
Like a pure component. So a component that never really gets necessarily displayed in your pattern library, right? Because your presenter components are what are populating your pattern library. Storybook works this way by default. It says you create a stories file and you populate it with these presenter components so that you can view them, you can pass in whatever data you want. So that's how we populated that. But we might have to, decide on one of those two approaches since we're populating the data for the design system with a YAML file. But yeah, I see your point about that. All right, so pretty cool, right? I mean, Twig.js. This was actually not something that we architected and we were like, we're amazing. This was using the React Storybook version and just adding the Twig loader to it. So apparently Storybook, what we learned in the process is Storybook has all these different versions where you say I want the view version or the HTML version. Apparently Storybook in doing that just adds the loader. It doesn't restrict any other loaders being added to it. And so we added the Twig loader and boom, we were there with Twig and React components side by side, which is really cool in my mind that it offers that.
Can we see that Twig file one more time? The button Twig file? That's it, and it just expects button content, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
So yeah, and then we have a little bit more complex. There is a, this is calling our button file. We're not using any namespacing here or anything, but it's calling our button file. But it has, it's passing the button content in, so it's actually inheriting that data. And you can see that in here as well. God, this is really hard to get right. Let me get out of this full screen jazz.
Is the lack of namespace just because it's alpha?
It is. That's actually at the top of our list for beta. And it was really just a time thing. I don't think there's actually a support issue. It's well supported by Twig.js. It was literally us just figuring out how to hook it up.
We're out of time.
Yeah. So here's our CTA here that includes our button and the button styles. It's terrible looking, but thanks, Luke. But yeah, that's the thing. Luke did all of the hard work, and then I make fun of him for his styling. That's our relationship. All right, so yeah, that's Storybook. So let me see. Let me look at something real quick. And make sure I got through everything. Editing components, show, React side by side. Yeah, let's jump on to the design system here. What? So this is actually just running Gatsby develop. It's just a Gatsby side in the background. We may change these commands too. These were just, let's get this going, and we plugged in yarn develop Gatsby for that. So here's our design system. So again, this is really stark. This is out of the box. This is we've applied minimal styling to get it up and running. You have your pages that are populating over here. You can populate those with MDX content, which again, this is just markdown right here. But you get the idea. It's the same thing that we've showed you with Carbon Design System, the same gut structure of building a style guide is there in place. I've kind of pre-filled content right now in the starter. I'm not real sure what this will hold like in a more sort of stable release, because we're still sorting that out. If you have input on that, that would be great too. But I've kind of pre-populated, so it can make sense to someone who's looking at it displayed. The only category in this that works a little bit differently, the only folder that works a little bit differently is the components folder, because obviously you want that to pull from your components folder in your project. And so let me actually show that right now. Oh my gosh, that's so large on my screen. So there's our components that we just looked at. That's the components directory for our project. It impacts Storybook. It impacts the style guide. We also have this new directory here called style guide. And these are the pages that are in there. So we have, oh shoot, this is actually the wrong one. Yeah, here we are, sorry. Style guide, so we have, that's why I didn't want to show you that, because it should match what you're seeing over here. We have the Get Started section, we have the installation and usage section, even the home page is its own thing. So, hello decoupled. Yeah, nailed it. All right. So let's look at that in all its loveliness. So again, this is like live reloading. This is all Gatsby. Like this is all Gatsby's live reloading system. All of their Webpack goodness, we're just inheriting that by default, and we've just built this sort of structure for a design system in that. Let's show, so there's our documentation. You'll notice the components directory is completely empty. It really only has this helpful file in it that says this directory is not going to behave like the other ones. It's going to behave differently. And that's because it's populating from your components directory. So if you're used to the older version of Emulsify, which sounds like no one in here has used it, which is kind of interesting. I should have asked that at the beginning. But if you are, you'll notice there are some new files in there. There are MDX files that we populated in here, or Markdown files. MDX is going to read either of those files. And that's where the tabs are going to come from for your component. So let's look at a component. So we have code. This is our code page where we're going to talk about the code of building a button and using a button. We also have a style page and a usage page. Organization-wise, we want those in this directory. We want to just be able to build markdown pages for our style guide in here, populate them with data. We have a couple of front matter things in there that are helpful out of the gate. One is that if you add a tab, you might add a markdown file in here that has nothing to do with your design system. It's not going to show up unless you put these two fields in here. So one is the name of the tab that you want to add. The second one is the order of the tab. So you can change the ordering of the tabs and control that. So this is the button styles page, as you can see. But let's look at the code page. So this isn't like straightforward MDX. So as I said, MDX allows you to literally write JSX in your markdown files. What we really wanted to do though, because again, this is documentation. Like this is, developers aren't going to often be writing or editing this content. We wanted it to be easier than that. And so what we did is we took sort of the JSX pieces, and I say we, but it's really Luke's magical brain, and we took those and we put them somewhere else so that what we can put in this page are just these React components. We don't even have to import them from somewhere that you're trying to figure out where should I import the component JSX from, or where should I import the code component from. You literally just use this syntax. And so if I copied this, and put it in between here, you're going to see, besides the styling issue, which is my fault, and will get fixed, that our text is now between those two elements. So again, this is the flexibility that I'm getting at. This is what we always wanted in building this, is this ability for easy to edit style guide and this ability to have flexible content. Not even Carbon Design System allows you to do this. It's like a very specific kind of component it prints out on the page that does both of these things. And so this is really flexible. Isn't that cool? Like you can write your component documentation however you want. You could not show code. You can choose to not show the code for it. You could show the code in a completely different tab. Again, this is like we're trying to build a design system generator, not a design system that does one thing, and I hope it works in your case, but a generator that is flexible enough to meet whatever the organization's need is. So yeah, pretty cool stuff. Let me go ahead and edit, show you. Like I said, this is actually populating this data. So you actually see, again, that's live reloading. That's actually live reloading the component on the page. So those YAML files are actually getting pulled in for that, as are the CSS files. The CSS files are automatically populating that component on the page. And again, the design system, the goal there is that it just kind of works because it's not a developer tool. It's something that's going to live probably in the scope of the organization as a whole. All right, does anybody have questions about that piece?
The component, does it load in an iframe? Do you use an iframe?
It does,
Okay.
yeah. Which sounds terrible, but they all do it.
Well, the reason I've asked that is because I've had problems. We've tried to do similar things like the design system with the Gatsby builds, and a lot of the existing solutions for that, the Gatsby styles leak into the components, but if they're in an iframe, they shouldn't happen.
Yeah, yeah. It really, like, we really set out, we're like, nah, we won't do it that way. Even though Storybook does it that way.
Yeah.
We'll be smarter about it.
Yeah.
And it was like, no, there's a reason they did it that way. So, yeah. Anybody have any other questions about that piece? Nope. All right, let's talk about what's next then. It's great because I'm almost done. All right, announcing alpha release. So this is, like I said, this is very alpha. We need help getting to beta. If you're interested in something like this, we would love to have your help. We actually have a good community around Emulsify as it is. So we're hoping that community, which a lot of them seem to be interested in this direction anyways, can help with some of these pieces as well. But in my mind, sort of the big chunks, there's definitely bugs and things that will, as we actually use this and develop in it, that we'll notice. But the big things in my mind, just so you know, in case you're interested in using this project that are missing right now. So twig namespacing is the ability to say, you know, at Adams, here's my thing, and it magically knows where to go. John built the components module that does this to name that twig namespace in Drupal. The current version of Emulsify uses that. And it's kind of built in, it just works. So that's kind of like the highest thing on our list, and I think I addressed it earlier, but it's actually not a technical issue, it's a time issue. Like we just need to implement it in our Twig.js usage. And then some custom Twig plugins. So once we do move to this ecosystem where it's Twig.js as opposed to like PHP running something and doing something in the background, which we're not doing anymore, we need to rebuild some of the niceties that we had in Emulsify, which were like a twig function to run this nice sort of BIM thing where you can pass in a class name and modifiers and a block name, and it kind of magically does its thing to create the BIM class that you want. Those also interact with Drupal attributes, so we'll have to refactor those for this side. The PHP ones will still live on because we need those to work that way. As they parse those twig files for the Drupal side. So that's kind of second on the list. The third thing is our build system is probably the most, it's like pre-alpha. The build system still needs some tooling around, and it's, again, just a time thing. There's no image minification currently and SVG spriting, things that were built into Emulsify 4. The good news is we're using Webpack, so we're actually in a more flexible space than we were with Gulp 3, which is what we were attached to on the other side. We either were going to have to refactor to Gulp 4 or move to something that made more sense. And then, of course, documentation. There's really sparse READMEs on both of these projects right now, which I'm going to give you links to here in a second. The documentation needs to be flushed out. How do I build a a not starter? How do I build just a Gatsby design system? Because I'm not interested in the Drupal starter. Like, we need documentation on that, and we could probably make that process easier and things like that. So yeah, that's kind of my mind, what gets us to beta. And then on the roadmap, some kind of more exciting things. If you are familiar with Gatsby, Gatsby's also come out with a theme UI, which is separate from themes, but it's sort of their recommendation because it follows sort of the same model. It's basically an ability to really easily sort of pass styling as configuration from a parent to a child. So imagine setting your colors and your typography in your design system or in our theme, and then your theme can then change those really easily in kind of a config management sort of model. I may have done a poor job of explaining that. Jackson actually helped develop that, so you can talk to him about it. So yeah, that's definitely top of our list because again, we're talking about designing design systems for different clients, for different projects that can meet different needs. Global data, I don't know if we'll go down this road or not. It's actually a valid question that he was bringing up, if we'll follow that pattern lab model of trying to provide this global data. But that's something that we put into a queue to think about because Emulsify 4 kind of provided it out of the box and Pattern Lab supports it. And then of course, there's a lot more stuff that we can do with this. That's why we chose these ecosystems, is it allows this flexibility to grow and to expand. We could build new starters and write support for other languages. You know, Twig.js has a loader. There's a lot of other languages out there that clients need support for. And that we could possibly get to live in these libraries in this way. So it's a very exciting release. We're very excited about it. I hope you're excited about it. And if you have any questions, I'm done.
Since you're loading the Twig.js right through the storybook implementation, you can kind of choose your own Twig library at that point, right? You're not stuck to Twig.js. Like there's a competitor called Twing.
Yeah.
It's apparently like more it's more feature parity.
Yeah, I read that. We haven't tried it, but
It's almost like you could just drop it right at that point.
you could.
And you're good.
Same thing for the design system. We could try that out with the Gatsby system. We could try it out with Storybook and see. I've wondered the exact same thing. Does anybody have experience with Twing as opposed to Twig.js?
Would
No.
Twig Loader let you swap that out, Joe?
I don't know if Twig Loader does, but we're actually not even using Twig Loader for the Gatsby project. We're just using Twig.js. I think we wrote our own loader, which was probably stupid. So we probably should use Twig Loader. That's a good question. Anybody have any other questions?
I think we had to like add a PR to Twig Loader for the namespacing because it wasn't part of the config.
At the
I don't know
time?
if it got merged in or not.
It's in the Twig.js documentation now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's like, this is how you do namespacing. I just couldn't figure out how to make it work in our scenario. But probably because we wrote our own loader. But yeah. Well, cool. Thank y'all for coming so much.